In this section of Homework 6, we're going to talk about the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of an if-then statement. Suppose we have an original statement, which is an if-then. So if P, then Q. Okay. The converse of that statement, which you may already know, is to put the if-then in the opposite direction. So the converse would be to have the if Q then P. So to change the direction. The converse and the original statement do not mean the same thing. If it rains, then I get wet. The converse, if I get wet, then it rains. They don't mean the same thing. It's possible the first one would be true. It rains, then I get wet, because it could be outside. And the second would not be true. If I get wet, then it rains. Maybe I'm taking a shower. Maybe I'm swimming, or whatever. So the two do not mean the same thing. The inverse of the original statement, now realize I'm going back to the original, the inverse is to change each part to its opposite. It's negation. So the opposite of P would be not P, implies, and what's the opposite of Q? Not Q. The inverse is also not the same as the original. However, the converse and the inverse are the same as each other, but not the same as the original, but different from the original statement. Okay, so they're the same as each other, but different from the original statement. Okay, now we're going to look at the contrapositive. The contrapositive is both of these together. So I'm going to switch positions. The P and the Q are going to trade positions, and they're going to become their opposites. So the Q is going to come to the front and become its opposite, so it's going to become not Q. And the P that's in the front is going to go to the end and become its opposite. So not Q implies not P. This is the same as the original. It's the same as the original statement. Now you have to remember, if you have an and or an or in here, that when you do the either the inverse or the contrapositive, you're going to have to use De Morgan's law. So, for example, I have not Q implies P and S. If that's my original statement, then when I do the contrapositive, they're going to change places and change to their opposite. So when P and S changes to its opposite, remember that's not P or not S. So the and has to also change to an or. The Q is going to move to the end, the not Q, and it's going to become its opposite. So it's going to become Q. Remember to focus on the position and not the particular letters. Whatever's in the front is going to move to the end and switch to its opposite, and whatever's at the end is going to switch to the beginning and become its opposite for the contrapositive. Okay, let's look at an example of a sentence and rewriting the sentence. Let's look at this one. If it snows, school closes. Okay, so let's call if it snows S and school closes C. So our original statement is S implies C. So our converse is going to be C implies S. Our inverse is going to be not S implies not C. And our contrapositive is going to be not C implies not S. So let's write these sentences. The converse is going to be if school closes, then it snows. Okay, the inverse is going to be if it does not, how many its do I need? If it does not snow, then school does not close. Notice that those two do not mean the same as the original. Okay. I said if it snows, school closes. I didn't say anything about what would happen if it does not snow. Okay, the contrapositive, if school does not close, then it does not snow. And that means the same thing. If it snows, then school closes. Well, if we look and we see school is not closed, we do know it did not snow because the original said if it did snow, school would be closed, but school's open. Okay, so the original and the contrapositive are the same. The converse and inverse are different. Let's do one that has an and involved. If Kim does not nap, and it's implied Kim stays up late, then Kim is grumpy. Okay, let's put some letters to this. Let's say napping is N, so not napping would be not N, and stays up late, so let's call that L, then she's grumpy. So our original is not N, and L implies G. So our converse is going to be G implies not N and L. Our inverse, however, is going to be what? N or not L implies not G. And our contrapositive is going to do both. It's going to switch and change them. So not G implies N or not L. Okay, so let's write out what the actual statements are. The converse statement would say, if Kim is grumpy, then she does not nap, and stays up late. Different meaning than the original. Okay, the inverse would be to change each in its original position to the opposite. So if Kim naps or does not stay up late, then Kim is not grumpy. Again, does not mean the same thing, because we said if she doesn't nap and does stay up late, so we didn't say anything about what would happen in the opposite case. Possibly the same thing, maybe something different. Okay, the contrapositive is the one that's the same as the original, and we switch the positions and change everything to its opposite. So the G is going to come to the front and become its opposite. So if Kim is not grumpy, okay, then the second part, then she naps or does not stay up late. And that means the same thing. So the original and the contrapositive mean the same as each other, and we'll use that fact when we look at the logical arguments in the next statement, in the next segment.